Hello there. In this video, we're going to continue working inside of Unreal Engine, but exploring a particular asset pack. So working through ideas of how to utilize asset packs and some top tips for kind of utilizing this particular one to make up some interesting scenes. So what are asset packs? So Unreal, owned by Epic Games, have a marketplace full of various asset packs and resources that can be utilized for game design or film and TV productions inside of Unreal Engine. Now, some have a charge attached to them, but there's also a load of free resources here. At time of recording, this is still the way to access these asset packs, but I believe Epic are about to change their structure and shift things over to another platform, so look out for details on that elsewhere. But currently, I have inside of the Epic Games launcher, inside of the Unreal space, this is what things look like. So we have a marketplace where there's lots and lots of different asset packs for different things. Now, some are full kind of realized scenes and assets, some are kind of effects or animation techniques or various meshes, various materials, lots and lots of things at your disposal here. This is something also, a top tip is, if this is something that you're interested in, is to get yourself an Epic Games account, which is free. And then each month they give 5 kind of packs away for free. I think it happens on the first Tuesday of every month. And so you can see I've claimed all of these this morning. I've come through and I've just said, I want that, I want that, I want that, I want that. And I've checked out my basket and it's cost me nothing. And just by doing that each month, I have collected quite a substantial amount of asset packs. Now, that hasn't downloaded all of those things to my system. It's just added them to my my Epic Games account. And so further down the line, I could kind of utilize some of those things and say, okay, that's what I want. And then I can start downloading. So in my library setup, you see, these are all of the things that I've collected over the years, but I've never spent a penny. All of this is just the free stuff that they've given away each month. And one of those asset packs is the one that I wanted to explore today, or utilize today, which is one called Assetville Town. So Assetville Town is a load of elements that make up this really nicely stylized, low poly, kind of Americana scenes. And so looking at the pack here, there are lots of different elements that can make up this pack. There's some floor planes, there's some large mountainscapes, some building blocks for houses, but loads and loads of props and items and elements. So that's what I am utilizing today. So I've created a project and I've imported those asset packs, or added those assets to this project. So I'm in my Unreal Engine and I've got my main level here, which is the default one that it starts with, but I'm going to create a new level to work with this asset pack on. So I'm going to go to Basic and Create. It's got a new level. When you create a new level, we should save it. So we're going to call this Asset Town 01. So I've now got a new level inside of my project that I can start working with these assets in. So where are these assets? They're inside of my content drawer. So once I've added it to my project, I have this folder called Asset Town. And inside that Asset Town folder, we have a number of folders here that contain the different assets or elements. They're all quite nicely organized and grouped together and named quite smartly here. So I can either navigate through those folders here within this main kind of viewing part of the drawer, but also that is replicated over in this file structure. So we've got those same elements, so maps and materials, meshes, poses, and textures. So the real interesting stuff happens inside of this meshes folder, which is all of the different static meshes. These are the assets that have been modeled elsewhere and packaged and collated together inside of this pack. And the meshes folder contains lots of subfolders as well. So buildings, building tile sets, characters, ground tile sets, interior props, nature, street props, vehicles, and of course there's a folder dedicated just to weapons. Of course there is. Of course there is. And so inside of these are some assets, some elements that I can start utilizing inside of my project. Before I do that though, it might be worth jumping in and having a look at this demonstration map. So if I double click on that, it may take a little moment to load up properly, but inside this particular asset pack, and you may find this in other packs that you utilize in the future, that there is like a demonstration or an overview map that's already created inside of this pack to kind of showcase what is available there inside of it. So that demonstration map has now loaded up, and you can see that we're in a little town. We're in Asset Town, or Assetville. Is it called Assetville or Asset Town? Don't know. But we're inside this this little village, this little town. And so all of these different elements are different meshes that have just been placed inside of this level. So this is actually an editable level, so I can go in and kind of click and move some things around should I want to. But I'm going to explore this very quickly just to kind of showcase some of the things that we've got and maybe use this as inspiration for my own creation. So I can do that by actually playing the levels. There's a little play button at the top here. So now I am actually inside of the engine, but as if I'm playing the game. So I can use my my mouse to kind of look around, but then my WASD keys to kind of navigate and move around as if I'm playing a first-person game. So everything is kind of static, but what we have here is a showcase of these assets that's just kind of placing them to build up this town, to make these little scenes, these little tableaus. So we've got a load of exterior action going on, little street props and these various characters that live inside of this world. But there's different scenarios. So we've got like a gas station over here. Down here we've got the police station, the sheriff's office, some FIB agents, some other cops stood outside. Go around the back of this building if we want, and there's some other things going on. What are you doing back here? What are you up to? We don't know. But a load of fences, a load of trees, these pylons and cables, these powers, all these little details that kind of build up these part of the world. Here's a bank. Hold up. You look familiar. I don't know that bit. We're a little bit on the side. Interesting. So we've got a bank. Oh, we've got the bank manager looking out the window. But look, there's all interiors as well. So a lot of these buildings we can also go inside. So there's interior props and everything kind of set up inside. So with this particular asset pack, oh, I'm back. I don't think I should be back here, should I? Maybe I should get inside the prison cell, the safe even. We're in a bank, aren't we? So lots and lots of things to explore. And with this particular asset pack, I just recommend kind of taking the time and looking around and looking for inspiration as to what sort of things, how these assets have been used. There's loads of apartments and hotel rooms as well. And then even if we go to the outskirts, there's a farm over here, trailer park, all sorts going on. But if I come up really high and just look down on the world, it's actually a relatively small map. It's just quite dense in detail. But off into the distance, we've got this repetition of this mountain asset to kind of fill in the horizon. So when you're actually on ground level, it looks like we're part of a much larger world. It's only really there that we can see the gaps on the horizon, and where the world actually ends. But here, this world could go on forever because of that thing placed into the background. So if I jump out of that and come back to my content and then my asset town level, this is where I could start utilizing some of those assets to maybe make a little scene of my own. So let's take a little moment to look at some of these meshes. So my kind of advice would be to maybe pick one of these buildings that we've got. So we've got a barn, a trailer, another trailer, and a gas station as kind of pre-built buildings. But also we've got a building tile set. So this is maybe slightly more of a challenge, but there's different elements inside of here that are the building blocks of a building that you could utilize to construct your own creation, or use these to customize the presets that we already have. You also don't necessarily need to have a building in your designs. But before I jump into buildings, well, I think I'm going to do a barn. So I'm going to go into this ground tile set, and inside the ground tile set are some tiles that are kind of flat but textured planes that have got different designs for different needs. So I quite like the look of maybe this one, this parcel of land. So I can click and drag that asset out onto my stage. And now this is exactly the same as any other element, in that I've got my controls for moving and manipulating and positioning that around in space. Let me grab this one. So we've got a dirt one as well. Now this dirt one is slightly smaller than this other one, so I could scale this up, or in this case most of these assets have been made in such a way that their kind of scale and proportions are kind of work out in relation to one another. So if I copy this one and move it along, two widths of those, or two lengths of those, is the width of this one. So that's worked out quite nicely. So it all kind of fits together. Then do I want a slightly different one? Maybe this one. Well, that's the one that I already got. But okay, let's put some variation in there by maybe rotating this around by 90 degrees possibly, and placing that over here. So I've now got this these kind of floor planes here in place. Maybe let's also put in a road as well. So let's zoom out, spin that road around by 90 degrees. But if you've ever played something like The Sims, or like Planet Coaster or something like that, it's the same kind of mentality in terms of just dragging assets out into the world and moving them around and building up your little worlds. So I'm not going to worry about the rest of this. I'm just going to create my little scene over here. So let me grab a building. So let's grab that barn, drag that out into my world, and kind of place it down onto the floor here. Then rotate it around to kind of decide what angle I want to maybe view that on. maybe I'll have it this way. I think that side is quite interesting. So now I've got a little barn here. Other things that maybe, so I'm looking at kind of big things to start with. So in nature, I've got some trees. So maybe I'll take this tree and just place that tree here, maybe. I'm starting to build up the basic kind of building blocks of my world. Now, before I go any further, I'm going to introduce a camera into my scene, and it's kind of good practice if you're building up little scenes and tableaus or any visual space to kind of do the camera as soon as possible, because as we saw with that overview map, there's lots and lots of things. You could build up an entire world, an entire level. But I am going to work with this as I just want to make this tiny little tableau, this static shot. And so I don't need to make an entire world. I only need to make whatever is inside of the frame of that camera. So I'm not wasting time, and I'm not putting any more pressure on my machines by building up all of this stuff. I only need to make what the camera can see. So to add a camera, it's back up in this quickly add to project section. There's a section called cinematic, and the one that I want to go is this called Cine Camera Actor, and that has brought into my scene this camera. Yeah, and then with the camera selected, I get this little preview of what the camera can see. So as I move the camera around using my same tools as everything else, it's kind of changing what the camera can see. I get that update there. But there's a better way, or more efficient way, I think, of working with that camera, and that's to do something which is called pilot that camera. So we can do this in a few places. We can do it by on the actual camera itself, or up here in the outliner window where we've got our camera. We right click and go down to Pilot Cine Camera Actor. Also the keyboard shortcut is Control Shift and P. If we want to remember more keyboard shortcuts, that's the thing. But now when I do that, I'm now inside of my camera, and I can see that because I've got this pilot. So we've got this picture of this plane, and I'm piloting that camera. But now I can use my kind of moving tools and my positioning, my up and down, and my orbiting with my right mouse click to quite quickly and potentially more intuitively line that camera up with the view that I want it to have. But can you see there's like a shift in how things look now that we're looking through an actual camera? So I can eject out of the camera up here with the eject button. Boop. So I'm pretty much stood in the same place. I'm stood where my camera is. But this is what my working kind of view looks like. But this is what my cine camera is actually seeing. So the reason things look different is because this camera has actually got a cinematic lens attached to it. So let me pilot again. And then we can see over in our details panel over here some of the controls that we have on over what our camera looks like. So with our camera selected, we get the details for that camera. First off, we got a film back. So this is kind of deciding the resolution, the scope and scale of what sort of camera we're working with. So by default, it's this 16:9 digital film, which is what I'm actually going to use. But just so you see, there's like an IMAX 70mm version. So this is how Christopher Nolan would see that scene. I'm going to go with the 16:9 digital film. So I've got a 16:9 resolution there. But then we've got this lens setting. So what type of lens do I have on my camera? And you can see these are replicants, or these replicate, or they are the equivalent of lenses that we would find in the real world. So if I put a 30mm prime, this is what we get. If I want to go a bit wider, I could go for a 12mm prime, or if I wanted to go a bit tighter, I can go for an 85mm or a 50mm, somewhere in the middle. I actually quite like that 30mm kind of setup, but you can play with these to your heart's content. But essentially there's different lenses that we can have on the front of our cameras. We can also play around with the focal length and the aperture, and all of that is controllable within the camera itself. But essentially what we're doing here is I'm creating that camera, deciding what the lens is going to be, and kind of composing my scene, my shot. And then this then informs me I need to kind of dress up whatever we can see inside of the scene here and fill it with interesting content. Anything beyond this fence post, so anything over here in my world, not going to see, therefore I don't need to do anything. Same thing behind the camera. But from this I can see that in my case here I've got a particular kind of definitive edge to my world. I can see that the world just ends, so, and we've got nothing going on in the background, so maybe that's something that I should consider and think about, of how to kind of fix that. So let's eject out of the camera. What I might also do is click on this little pin here, which then fixes that camera view, pins that preview into my view, so then when I'm working over here on something else, I can still see what the camera's seeing over there. So what could I do to fill that gap in? I could put in another building. That could be a solution. So just take a building and pop that over there. So there it's got an idea of the world is continuing off, like there's something out of frame, that there's another building, another location there. I also really like, there's a inside of the ground no, it's not. Where is it? Oh, it's in the nature folder. There's this, in this particular pack, there's a thing called the mountains asset. Now this gets scary. When I drop this into my scene, boom, everything goes dark. Why has everything gone dark? Because I've just placed a massive mountain over everything. We are inside of that mountain. This is a huge asset because everything is kind of proportionally to scale. So I can move that mountain around with my keys here. So just pushing it off into the distance. There we go. And then placing it over here. Can you see how just by pushing that off into the distance, just having something there out of frame gives us the illusion that the world goes beyond the boundaries there. Might also make a duplicate of that with my Alt click and drag. Also get some variation by rotating that around. And maybe pushing this one maybe back a little further. So if I look what's going on, so these are off, way off into the distance, as they should be in the real world. In kind of reality. But I've just got something going on that horizon line now. It just gives us that illusion that something else is happening. I might also kind of copy this tree, maybe push that over here. That could maybe fill up that gap a little bit. Or another tool that we could use inside of this nature pack. See, we've got these things that are linked as being blue. These are static meshes, so these are models that we can click and drag and add to our scene. And one of them is this corn plant here. So I could add a piece of corn to my scene. But if I wanted a corn field, rather than duplicating or dragging out loads of these pieces of corn, we can utilize one of these other variants of this, which is this static mesh, but a foliage element. And there are a few things in this pack that are also classed as foliage. So the bush and some trees. So anything colored green is a foliage asset as well. But how does foliage work? Well, if I move my view around so I can see, so I'm going to make a field of corn in this corner. And I can come up to the top here from, rather than being in selection mode, I'm going to switch to foliage mode, which brings up a sub menu over on the side. And I want to add some foliage. And so this then links to all of the assets that I've got inside of my project that could be classed as foliage. And there is my my corn. So then if I tick that corn, and there are other things you can play around with inside of here, but I'm just going to leave them on the default settings for now. I'm in this paint mode. And now as I bring my cursor over my scene, I've got this this brush. So the brush size is controlled with this slider here. We've also got the density of how dense this paint effect is. But I'm going to leave them on the defaults and then just paint over that area there. Very quickly, I have now made a field of corn just by painting in that foliage. But then come back to selection mode. The other beauty of this is that that is classed as one single asset. So we haven't got to calculate and place all of those things, but it's also quite good for the processing power or consideration of the machine as well. But also it's done a lovely job. If let's pilot our camera again. I'm just filling in that gap there in this case and just hiding that horizon line. And now we've got that kind of depth to our scene, which is quite nice. Okay, what else could we do to make this scene a little bit more interesting? Is to maybe place some other things in. So I've got some vehicles. So let's grab a car, place that over here. Got various cars at our disposal. Maybe let's put another truck in here, but position that inside of my barn, peeking out of my barn. Let's go with some street props. So a barrel. I like that barrel. Pop that there. Let's put some boxes. Let's get... What else? Got some crates. So the way to kind of build up kind of convincing scenes is finding assets that make sense to be in those places, but then when you place them in, so I've dropped this ladder in, and this is quite a good example actually, is I've placed that ladder into my scene, so there's a ladder, but thinking about the reality of this and the storytelling is that where is that ladder going to? So if you were to climb up that ladder, because there's no runs this side, the steps are on that side, what are you actually operating on? Why would you have a ladder around that way? Well, you wouldn't, but if I turn that ladder around and position it closer to here, now I might be coming up here, or someone might be coming up here to work on something at the top. What are they working on? Well, maybe they're doing some painting. So they're painting that, so let's get some paints out there as well. So thinking about all of the elements that you're placing into your scenes, all of these assets, what's the story behind them? What's the reason for them being there? And that makes much more convincing kind of scenes and worlds. Now you can get totally carried away with this sort of stuff. But I'm just going to quickly place a couple more things in just to flesh my scene out a little bit. So because he's got a truck, he's also got some tires. And is there a bike or something in here? Or there we go, we'll have a bike. We'll place the bike in the world. So pop that down onto the floor. Let's move that along here. But similar sort of scenarios, the bike wouldn't just be stood there. Bikes will be leant against things, so I can rotate it slightly to lean that here, but maybe it's on a slight angle. So he's kind of come along and placed his bike at the side. So just thinking about what is going on in this world, and why are things the way that they are. I keep mentioning people. Let's put some people in. So there is a load of character elements inside of this pack as well. And so who does this farm belong to? Maybe this guy. Let's drag him out, place him in my scene. And a note on these particular characters is they have these, they're in this T pose, so they've just got their arms out straight. But there is also some other elements at play inside of this pack that are quite useful. So with that character selected, if I come over to the properties panel, so these are the properties for that character. And at the top here, I've got a thing called animation. And the animation mode, if I change that rather than use animation blueprint to use animation asset, so also inside this asset pack is in the animation to play, there's an asset called character poses, which is an animation sequence. Now that animation sequence is a series of kind of settings, poses and keyframes of different positions, different poses, which we can then utilize, or now I've applied that to this character. And then I've got this slider here called initial position, and I've got a slider between 0 and 1, but at various stages of that, it kind of switches between different poses. So yes, there's still a limit to what I have available to me, but there are some options here beyond just that T-pose. So I could have him kind of shocked. Huh? But why is he shocked? Because there's another guy maybe that is saying something, or like, who does that car belong to? This girl. She can come out. So this lady's here. Same setup. So with her selected, I'm going to say use animation asset. What asset? Character poses, and then choose one of the things. So she can be, look over there, there's a thing. And he's like, what? Okay, so we're setting up a little narrative and a scene, or she could be pointing at a car or pointing at him, whatever it needs to be. Yeah. So let's now take a look through that camera again and see what we've got. So suddenly the scene is all kind of fleshed out. There's more areas of interest, more interesting things going on. I think actually though I want to be a little bit closer to the action. So I might bring that camera in now that I've got some things set up. And note that I've now kind of cropped out that ladder. So there wasn't really a point in putting that in, but sometimes that's the situation, or those are the choices that you make to just get that nicely composed shot. And one more trick that I might actually utilize, so talking about things that are off camera, is what if I took a copy of that tree and I positioned it over here, and it doesn't necessarily matter that it's in the middle of the road because we're not going to see it when it's out the shot here. But I have now got a tree over here, and the reason I've placed that tree over there is if we come back to piloting our camera, if I then playing around with my light, so Control L. The Control L allows me to move my sun around in the sky. If I reposition my sun over here, so now I can see it changing because of the light conditioning is changing, but also how the shadows are falling, I can place my sun so that it's casting shadows of the tree over everything. Okay, so now I quite like this lighting scenario, and so we've got again another hint of more things going on in the world, just taking place from that tree, which we can't see, but we've got the shadows that are being cast over here, which is quite nice. Yeah. So this is also still just working in my medium viewing, my medium settings. I should probably save this first as well. Do a save. But now, when I'm kind of happy with how things are looking, if I change my engine scalability up to epic, so now I'm going to get more realistic lighting conditions and more realistic shadows happening. And if I also turn on real time as well, another lovely thing about this asset pack is that these trees are actually animated to distort and wobble to make them look like they're blowing in the wind. Now I am just going to render out a static shot, but I like to kind of have that on to just kind of get that look. Now if I am also just rendering out a static shot, maybe I'll go to cinematic as well, which will make things look even more realistic. One final thing that I'm going to do with my camera, just think about what is it focused on. So we've got a different lens and we can play around with our aperture. So I could make my aperture as wide as possible. So the smallest number here, sorry if my head's in the way there, it's the aperture. I can change the aperture, which is essentially changing the depth of field of my camera. I want a kind of shallow depth of field, so a wide aperture, so a small number. So now can you see that my mountains are in focus here, but everyone else kind of isn't. So if I come down even further, where is it? We've got some focus settings somewhere. I've gone past. Oh, sorry, it's up a bit. So focus settings. So we've got this slider here to control where the focal point is. And so currently it's set to, is that 100,000 centimeters? So it's way off in the distance. And we can actually visualize this with this tick box here called Draw Debug Focus Plane. And in my case, you can just see a tiny little bit of purple here. And so what that is this visualization of where the point of focus is inside of our scene. So if I then kind of scrub that number, you start seeing that focal plane moving backwards and forwards in 3D space. For this, I can then line up that plane with the thing that I want to be in focus. So I want the focus to be on my people here. So that plane is in place. I can then turn that off. Now that's changed, that's shifted the focal point, or helped me set the focus point to be on my people. And now I've got this kind of lovely kind of, depth of field, shallow depth of field going off into the distance. If I leave my focal point there and just play around with my aperture, so I can increase my aperture, so all the way up, I'm then getting more things in focus as we go off into the distance. So we can see our mountains, but as sorry, my head's in the way. So changing my aperture here, as I bring that down, we're now getting some defocus going off into the distance, this shallow depth of field, which is quite nice. So that was a quick kind of demo of how to establish and set up a scene. One final thing to maybe consider is, how do we render this out? Now, we're in a real-time render engine, so the rendering has already taken place. So in our case, I'm just going to render out or export out a static shot. And so in Unreal terms, this is called a high resolution screenshot. So inside of my scene here, I just want to ensure that I'm in the right scalability settings for my scene. So I'm going to crank things up to cinematic. I'm also going to select one of my elements just to highlight that another thing we need to consider when doing a high-res screenshot is that we'll also capture any of the UI elements that we have inside of our scene. So pressing the letter G on your keyboard hides those things. We press G again, I get that setting, that view up again. So remembering to press G to hide those elements. Then I come up to my little burger menu in the top left-hand corner. So I'm looking through my camera, go to the burger menu, and then down to high resolution screenshot. Leave my settings as default and click capture. Then down the bottom of your screen, you won't be able to see behind my head, but it comes up with a little link to say where it has made that shot from, or where it has saved that to, which is actually inside of my project folder, is saved, and then screenshots, and then Windows editor. It might be slightly different on a Mac, but then we've got the screenshot, and there is that image of the scene that I've made, saved as a PNG file, which I can then upload somewhere else and share to the world. So hopefully that has been useful. So just remember that this kind of workflow, yes, was utilizing that Assetville pack, but those same principles, same philosophies, same workflows, same tools can be applied to any asset pack you may utilize in the future. So I hope that's been interesting and of use. Do take care, and I'll see you again soon. Thank you.